The Tosei Bandai team has a pretty bad reputation, and they've really earned it. They've cranked out a lot of stinkers over the years, some of the worst games that the Famicom has seen. And yet, somehow they've done decently with the SD Gundam Gaiden series. The original game might not have been a top-tier RPG, but it was still a pretty good one. And now here's Night Gundam Monogatari 2, and it is a step down, but not that much of one. SD Gundam started out as a comedic spin-off of the Gundam series, but then Bandai turned it into a series of collectible cards and stickers, and gave things a coat of paint to make it look more fantasy, and that's where the Night Gundam stuff comes from. There was also a very basic card game you could play with your friends as you collected the stickers. It was basically war. That card game happens to be in Night Gundam Monogatari 2, though you have to play with another player, at least until you're pretty far in the game, when they finally start implementing the card battles into the story. Night Gundam Monogatari 2 picks up where the first game left off. Sadam Gundam is dead, and the world is returned to peace. But not for long. Two kingdoms that will seem very familiar to anyone who has watched Gundam fall into war. The first game had all original characters, or original to the sticker cards. A lot of the characters in Night Gundam Monogatari 2 are fantasy versions of Gundam characters that existed before the cards. The game has 6 chapters, and you'll control a group of knights from each faction, switching up with the chapters. In the first chapter, you're controlling Zeta, and in later chapters you have Amuro and Double Zeta, which is its own character, and you will be fighting Char over the course of the story. Another quirk of the chapter system is that it skips the initial grinding for you. Okay, not really, but your characters start out at level 5, and you won't have any trouble with the enemies in the starting area at that level. Night Gundam Monogatari 2 has a very streamlined interface. As you're exploring, you hit the A button to interact with things, and hitting start brings up a menu that has access to all of the functions you want. Your inventory, magic, equipment, status. You can also set up camp and fully recover your health, but there's a chance of an enemy attack when you do that. You also don't recover magic by using the camp option. Equipment is rather conveniently defined by the modifier it gives you. It all has names, it just also shows you how the equipment will affect your attack and defense. While you're wandering around the outside world, naturally you'll get attacked by random monsters, and the combat system is about as straightforward as you can get. You could choose to fight or run away right at the start, and then every character chooses whether they're going to attack, use magic, use an item, that kind of thing. Enemies tend to be pretty drop-happy in this game, sometimes dropping equipment, but more often dropping items that you just sell for more cash. In the hour that I had to record with for this one, I managed to clear the entire first chapter. That's 2 dungeons. So the game definitely moves along at a pretty rapid pace. The biggest challenge seems to be that sometimes you just have to locate the right person to talk to advance the story. There are 2 battery save slots in Night Gundam Monogatari, and saving is solely done at inns. Inns have a weird function in this game where you can haggle with them over the price for staying the night, though I was never successful at getting them to lower their rate. Night Gundam Monogatari 2 is pretty well regarded in Japan. The whole series on the Famicom is flagged as the best work that Bandai did on the system. And we have a 3rd game coming. I haven't had a chance to touch it yet, but from what I've read, people consider it to be the best of the trilogy, so my fingers are crossed it'll be pretty good. This is turning into a pretty short video precisely because Night Gundam Monogatari is about as straightforward as RPGs get on the Famicom. The biggest curve it throws at you is having different chapters where you play different parties. And that's not exactly uncommon anymore. From my perspective, I appreciate it when one of these RPGs moves along at a pretty rapid pace, and while the encounter rate in dungeons was pretty high, Night Gundam Monogatari isn't really dragging its feet either. By the time you've explored the environment around town and figured out how to play, you're ready to head over to accept the first quest. And once you have that in hand and have walked back, then you're leveled up enough for the first dungeon. And once you've fully explored that first dungeon, then you're leveled up enough for the second dungeon. I've played so many RPGs that require that you grind to do even the most basic tasks in the game, that I really appreciate it when an RPG doesn't make me do that. My biggest complaint here is that the card battles were front and center in the original game, or at least around enough that you could dive into them right away, and in the sequel they make you wait a long time before you're able to play them. But overall, this is a surprisingly respectable RPG. Not one of the peak RPG experiences on the Famicom, but if you liked RPGs, this one is definitely better than average.